I come away from the testimony so far with the feeling that your agencies collectively and individually need more authority to expedite these rules and make this system work better. Do any of you disagree? And please don't hesitate to disagree.
Mr. Chairman, I'm going to jump in, even though it's not exactly on point to your comment, because I don't want to let stand on the record without responding. And I know this is dangerous at the first hearing I'm testifying before you as our new chair. But you talked about the inadequacy of voluntary actions. And I submit to you that every railroad has a voluntary rule book which goes beyond the requirements in the FRA that really helps deliver the safest transportation mode America has. And you talked about inward-facing cameras. We're not waiting for the rule. Kansas City Southern has already gone through the process, had to go through.
Well, you may be right, Mr. Hamburger, and I apologize for interrupting, but I'm limited in terms of the time I have to ask my question. You may be right about some railroads, but certainly not all. Metro North is not moving ahead with cameras. The NTSB has recommended to Metro North that it have those cameras, but we still have not seen them. It took a derailment with 4 fatalities to cause Metro North to implement automatic train control. Alerters and other common sense, sensible measures still have not been implemented. There is a reason why Congress has mandated certain actions, and the rules necessary to enforce those laws still have not been issued in many instances, despite deadlines that have been passed. And I am not, I hope, unfairly criticizing the FRA or PHMSA. I know that resources are an issue, but I'm asking really for authority. Whether the agencies need authority to expedite these rules, to issue emergency orders. We're talking here about huge and humongous costs in lives and dollars, in the credibility and trust in our system, potential environmental effects. I was going to hold up, hope we now have these issues unite and interlock the entire country. As you can see, what happens along those arteries of transportation affects the Midwest, the states that are represented here by my colleagues from North and South Dakota, Missouri, and eventually, potentially, Long Island Sound, as well as Albany, places in New York, the Northeast. So there has to be a sense of urgency here that I think may not be felt by all the railroads in all necessary respects about these rules. So in terms of enforcement of our laws that protect safety and reliability, isn't there a need for more authority? And Mr. Blackwell, you seem to be on the verge of saying something, so let me call on you.
I was. Thank you, Mr. Chairman. We believe that we've identified the most expeditious process. We have not placed bureaucratic process above public safety. We take our responsibility with respect to public safety at the Commission deeply seriously. You asked about additional authority. Under the applicable statutes and regulations, and Mr. Hamburger suggested that the Commission might be able to do a wholesale exemption of positive train control. Under applicable statutes and regulations, a wholesale exemption of the infrastructures associated with PTC from NEPA and the National Historic Preservation Act would require negotiation with the Advisory Council on Historic Preservation and the National Conference of State Historic Preservation Officers, and a full notice and comment rulemaking of the Commission, including consultation with tribal nations, and that would take us well beyond the December 2015 deadline.
Any other comments? And let me ask the same question with respect to resources. More authority, clearly necessary. What about more resources? Also necessary, based on what I've heard today and what I've heard over years of learning and listening about this process. I know that Mr. Szabo would agree because we fought for more resources for the FRA, and what we've achieved, I will say, still is inadequate in spite of the increase that we managed to restore the budget. So I think that one of the lessons of today is that we need both resources and authority. Let me ask in particular about the operation classification results so far. As I mentioned at the very outset, a very high proportion of the samples, I think the majority of the samples taken indicated that the packing was inappropriate to the content of the crude. I know I'm probably misstating in technical terms the result, but basically in the majority of samples, correct procedures were not followed.
Within those particular samples that were taken, we started this effort last August, and we have gone out on a series of times doing this testing. And each time we've gone out, we have extended the testing that we perform. We started by looking first at flash point, initial boiling point. As we learned more, we continued to go back and expand the tests. We now include vapor pressure and sulfur content. We're beginning to do corrosivity tests and flammable gas content. It is a learning experience in terms of trying to understand the characteristics of this particular crude oil. We have to all remember we're talking about crude oil here. We're not talking about a refined product, and crude oil varies from region to region and place to place, and we want to understand exactly what the characteristics of this particular crude are. Last week we were out again. We had a multi-agency strike force in North Dakota with members of the FRA, the FMCSA, the North Dakota
Well,
folks
let me
as
just
well.
interrupt because I want to turn to Senator Blunt for a next round. But on February 4th, you released the first round of your test results, which concluded that 11 of 18 samples taken from cargo tanks delivering crude oil to loading facilities were not assigned to the correct transportation packing group. And as a result, you issued notice of violation, $93,000 in fine to the shipping companies involved. Doesn't that give you a lot of alarm?
It does indeed, and that is why the department issued an emergency order related to classification and testing. We amended that order today after we had some questions from operators about the order, and that's why we're out on the ground every day, despite resource issues. I didn't respond to that question.
So
but we certainly have
maybe
those.
voluntary compliance isn't working as it should be.
Well, I think we have to double check on these things, absolutely.